And we're live.
Howdy.
Welcome to another episode of the IAMKAYPEE podcast. And I am your host, obviously, KP. And this is the Scotland's Trash Panda in residence, Laura Hope.
That me.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Nice to see you.
I know, it's been a few episodes since you were last on, actually.
Uh-huh.
People were thinking that maybe something had gone up.
A piano had fallen on me or something equally unsuspicious and probable.
Hopefully. And also, we're obviously drinking again.
Yes, of course. So, skål.
To those people that are drinking with us.
Yes.
If there is any.
So we're just finishing up a sour IPA, which I've now forgotten the name of, but it was really nice. But it makes me feel like I've licked a battery a little bit. And then we have coming up a Gewürztraminer, which is a grape I found out you super like a couple weeks ago. Okay. So this one is...
Is this the one you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this I tasted when I was doing my WSET level 2. But this one is also like a biodynamic and natural one. So fulfilling both of what I've learned are some of your favorite categories of wine. So I'm excited for you to try it.
Yes, but it is sort of... It feels weird for me because I'm not in the wine world, but when I say biodynamic or natural wines, I just think people look at me and think you're a complete hipster. Yeah. Unless you're actually in wine, it's kind of like...
and it is a hipster thing in wine as well. Like a lot of, like
we have... hipster things in wine.
I think the hipster thing is not putting things in wine. That's the... yeah. So for people who don't know... basically a natural wine. You can get organic wines, you can get natural wines, and you can get biodynamic wines, and it's a bit of a Venn diagram. You can be organic without being natural or biodynamic. Yeah. Biodynamic is a really weird category because it's partly based on the theories of basically an esoteric philosopher.
Those are two big words together that I kind of understand.
And not that he is esoteric and that he's an esotericist. So it's like
he's an
very
esoterrorist.
He really hates Esso petrol stations.
I thought it was an SOS terrorist.
I think they all are. But yeah, he was living in the 1800s, I think, but he came up, or maybe the early 1900s as well. It might be up to him at this point because it does actually get into magic essentially a lot of, so some of it's sort of logical stuff like you give back to the farm as well as taking from it, so it's very against kind of like monocultures and things like that, but it's also like planting according to an astrological chart and burying crystals and stuff like that, so it gets basically into practical magic. Yeah, basically. So pretty much you're
probably seen as an alchemist if you're doing these sorts of brewing and boiling and sort of
it's sort of hedge magic basically, so that's quite cool. It's fun. And then natural wine is basically, I think they say, sort of like nicely fermented grape juice. It's like you don't add anything if you can avoid it. So ideally no sulfur, although you do often have to add some sulfur, and some sulfur is present in the wine anyway. So it's a bit of a myth that sulfur in wines is what gives you a hangover. Is
that what people say? I've never heard.
Yeah, people say that, but it's
what about beer then?
Exactly. Well, like there's sulfur in everything. Like it's just silliness. And yeah, you use sort of wild yeast you allow it to ferment spontaneously as opposed to using kind of designer yeast. I guess Jazz probably went over a fair bit of this on the podcast she did with you.
I've had a few guests on, like the Jan from Black Brewery. He seemed to really know his history when it came to sort of ale and sort of where it came from and where it stemmed from. So I think he was talking about something that was similar, because it all sort of philosophy comes from the same place, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a different, like the in this case the philosophy behind biodynamic wine is like relatively new in terms of the history of making booze, but it's relatively old to now becoming a hipster thing basically. So what I
is it too mainstream now for people to sort of...
No, I just mean that it's like, it's not like it's a new idea. It's quite an old idea. Right. It's just that people are kind of taking it up now. Okay. So what I often will say to customers, if they don't really know that much about natural wine, I say it's basically wines that have become so traditional, they've come full circle to being hipster, basically. Yeah.
It's funny how that swings and roundabouts like that with stuff, especially hipster.
Yeah, it's the same as that. I don't know if you've ever seen the series Portlandia, but they did
I've not watched it, but I've heard of it.
They did a sort of a couple sequences of like the spirit of the First they started with the 90s is alive in Portland, and then they did the 1890s as things that like hipsters got more into like penny farthing bicycles and stuff. And it was wonderfully perfect.
Is
it was
Portland
great.
Not the mecca for hipsters?
It's supposed to be. It's sort of, I think, even beyond, because there's like urban hipsters and there's like proper hippie crazy hipsters, and I get the sense
you make them sound like they're werewolves, like, you know, just, like, hanging around in your garbage.
No, I understand werewolves. I'm not too sure about that.
I don't think hipsters understand themselves either.
No, but I think it's one of those kind of
what am I?
Like
a werewolf.
I think one of the tenets for being a hipster is you have to deny that you're a hipster, basically.
Yeah, that seems to be like I embrace when people sort of tell me, like, I know they jokingly call me the hipster wherever I go, because I'm always the unusual type in amongst a group, because I've always done like different things in my life, like, you know, American football, karate when I was younger, and then I started doing MMA when I was older, so I was always like the odd one out somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm used to people sort of picking up on the hipster thing, because I'm always someone's hipster.
Yeah, because just relatively hipster. There's like
that group, I'm like the hipster.
Yeah. Whereas if we like went and hung out in like you know, Brooklyn in like 2010, it would be like you wouldn't even register on the hipster scale probably. But
I had a coach, and he was he kept calling me a hipster all the way through my training camp, and he was like, you're such a hipster, and I was like, Sloanie, I'm the least hipster out of all my friends that I know. And he was like, what music are you coming out to for your fight? And I said, South African hip hop, and he just laughed at me. I was like, okay, maybe you've got a point, yeah.
No, I'm just coming out to whale sounds. It's cool.
What, like the sound of the country, or?
Oh no, that's just singing. That's
like, it sounds like a cat being scratched. It's like that's what Welsh.
Oh, it's like
that's what Welsh is.
That's what it looks like. I have heard it being spoken a little bit, because I did have a Welsh flatmate.
What, the cat language or Welsh?
Cat language, much cat language. Welsh, slightly less, but a bit. Because I did have a Welsh housemate for a couple of years who liked to entertainingly change the house computer's Facebook login screen to being in Welsh, and then you couldn't even figure out what button meant make this be in another language.
How did the screen have enough space for it to?
Yeah, exactly. The buttons are all like.
You just had extra long keyboards.
The computer screen actually got bigger over time. It was. Yeah.
It was one of those evolving computer screens.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it just got
self-replicating.
Yes. Yeah, nanobots.
Have you seen this thing in the news this week to sort of cut? And it was I think I saw it in I Fucking Love Science, which I used to love that Facebook page and the website a lot, but they seem to have just gone off the rails slightly, but they still have some really good articles. Yeah. And it was this article about them discovering the bones of what was called the Cheddar Man in the UK.
Oh, I did see this, yeah.
And he's called the Cheddar Man because I think his bones were found in the Cheddar Valley. Not because...
It just makes me giggle because I assume he's made of cheese.
No, he was lactose intolerant.
He's from the moon. He's made of cheese.
I'm the moon. And so they figured out from his DNA, however they sort of spliced his genes and DNA and whatnot, and they figured out that he was dark-skinned and had blue eyes. And people like all the magazines to try and get clickbait were saying, well, the first man of the UK was probably black with blue eyes, which is quite disingenuous, because they have bones of older sort of people that were in the UK, but this is the most complete that was found.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So it's only been like 6,000 years ago, I think. And if you're a Christian, that ties into that idea, so that's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's okay.
Yeah, if you're a creationist, then you're sorted. Although you wouldn't think that the first UK man would be black. But there was a lot of hate in the comments on these pages.
Really?
Yeah, they were saying it was like Muslim propaganda.
Seriously? Like if you're invested in the skin color of a 6,000-year-old dead dude, you need to chill out. Like you've got problems. The problem is not that guy. The problem is you. Whoa.
Well, most people don't even realize that, even though I don't believe in Jesus, that he would have been, from the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. He's always
like... Every depiction of him is some white sort of... Even, well, he is Jewish. He looks like the guy from The Passion of the Christ. That's how he's depicted.
Yeah, or even blonder. Like, you see these sort of, like, Sacred Heart ones that are just, like, super blonde
And he looks so medieval as well sometimes. Like,
he looks all sort of, like, very carefully bearded. And it's very funny.
How do you carefully beard someone?
Lots of trimming, I suppose, and grooming. Much grooming of the mustache. I was rewatching the series American Gods recently for some
big fan
inspiration. Big fan. But I got to the last episode and it's one with all the Jesuses. And they're talking about how one was like hanging out petting a baby dinosaur and stuff, and it makes me happy.
I'm confused for that timeline.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone is.
Who believed in Jesus at that point then?
Well, he would be somebody believes in now.
Okay.
And it would have to be in that timeline where the planet is super new and that humans hung out with dinosaurs.
Oh, right, okay.
That old one where you go to the Bible amusement park and there's just like humans chilling with dinosaurs.
The Ken Ham, what is it, the Noah's Ark amusement park that he has? I think it's in Kentucky, of all places. And he has a fully functioning Noah's Ark.
Cool.
And he has, I think it's animatronic dinosaurs and a cave people hanging out. Obviously, they're only like 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
Well,
because everything is. I'd be so into that other than the spirit behind it, because I'm really into like obsessive pursuits and dinosaurs. So that's cool, but he
was the big one pushing that there was satellite images of what they thought was an ark that had broken on the mountain. And I think it was just a formation of stone. It was natural.
I never really looked at it, but I remembered it. Yeah.
But he was pushing for people to go over and sort of excavate. And they were really... I mean, if you can find Noah's Ark from a satellite image...
Yeah, and no one else has. Okay.
That's what... That completely goes against the sort of, degrading and whatnot, especially if it was wood. You wouldn't have the time to petrify, I guess, as much. And
unless it was like really specific conditions.
If it was under the water, but it's on a mountainside.
Yeah, it doesn't really work unless something. It's not.
And not one that's
cold. Outside the realm of possibility, but it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
And I honestly I think people I assume, remembering some of this, the position was like, oh, people, it's an atheist world and people don't want to investigate this. It's like, no, if you're an atheist archaeology, that would be the shit to find. It would be amazing because it's not inherently a religious discovery. You found a big old boat. Like, that's really cool. If anybody actually thought it was credible, they wouldn't be like, oh, this could be awkward. Yeah. Maybe we'll prove that God exists by accident. Like, it's not how archaeology tends to work.
Well, that frustrates me when there's biblical scholars that are in the Jerusalem and they're excavating what could be Jesus's cave, And it's like, what evidence?
They all could be.
You have a cave from that time period, which is a bit dodgy. Like, no one really knows specifically. Yeah. And you're using they're using science to then try and prove.
I think it's because there is a graffiti on the inside that said Jesus was here. I think that's
James.
James.
Yeah, Jesus was his Sunday name.
Oh.
James was his working name.
And Jim to his friends, or
I think he had a brother called James as well.
Did he?
Yeah, in some parts of some Bible it described that he had brothers.
Interesting. I wonder if they were literal or metaphorical brothers.
Well,
just like play basketball with them. Yeah.
Slamming hoops with Jesus. Jesus is my homie.
Yes, Jesus is my homeboy.
Jesus is my friend.
Well, this has already gotten super weird, so that's awesome. I'm excited.
But yeah, hopefully something comes out. I mean, it'd be... I posted something on Facebook, I think a month ago or something, and my idea was that we should, like, the whole world should sort of set a date 6 months down the line.
Oh, I did see that, yeah.
And it should be to do with television networks. And just say, put it out into the ether, say, God, be here on this date. We'll televise it and we'll have cameras, we'll put a date, and then we'll just promote the hell out of it. I mean, God must have satellite or something. And just, wait 6 months, and if he turns up, just have people there to meet him that are scholars, biblical scholars, and actual scientists, and if just to put to bed.
Yeah, except because the argument that there's a really clever inbuilt argument in religions generally, which is that you have faith, and that's sort of what makes things real, not actually having proof.
That's true.
Which is very clever.
The Bible's supposed to be the truth. So that is something that is physical that happened.
Yeah.
So then why not someone come down, you know?
No, it's true. But then nobody thinks, well, maybe probably actually some people do think that God wrote the Bible. So
I know that is weird. I don't think they can say that. I think with the Christian Bible, that is only ever said that it's inspired by the word of God.
Yeah.
Even the early stuff, which like no one understands that the actual Old Testament is Jewish and like extremely old. Like all the sort of stories from it, Noah and all these, like Abraham. I think before Abraham. I think when Abraham comes in, that's when it gets a bit weird. It's
weird before that too. It's pretty weird.
Well, timelines, of course. Like, Noah's like 800 years old.
Is it before? I don't know if it's before or after Abraham. And you have the begats, which is the like sons of so and so, and like everybody's like super old, and it just is really strange.
But have you seen the list? It's like so and so begat.
Yeah, that's the begats. Yeah,
begat so and so.
Yeah,
so and so.
And they live for 980 years, and you're like, what? No.
I thought it was like the Osbournes. You know, it's a TV show. The begats.
The begats.
This is baby begat. Yeah. This is mommy begat.
It just making me hungry. It sounds like begat.
No.
But
there was no begats back then.
Even if you like believed in literally the word of the Bible, I think if I were a person who felt that way, I would still be very uncertain based on how many times it's been translated into and out of different languages. And I would be like, I don't even really like, you know, totally trust directions like that are translated into, you know, one other language using the power of Google. And when it's like been kind of broken telephones down through the centuries, you think you'd still have room for like, do I believe in this literal version of this or that literal version of this? Like,
there was an interesting theory that I've read a few times. I've not seen it in a while actually. It was something when I was really, really into sort of learning and researching about religion. I'm not religious, but I like to understand why people and what people believe, you know, just to see where they're coming from.
Yeah, well, a lot of the world runs on that, so it's good to investigate it.
Well, mostly everyone.
Yeah.
And they were saying that the way the books are structured, they think there's a source book.
Yeah.
I think it's like a something's X, they've called it. So the way all these people who are well versed in sort of literature and language, they say that it all seems like it's all sort of centered around one book that doesn't exist.
Okay, interesting.
So they're trying to find this like sort of Bible X, as they're calling it, which would have the main source text.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I love how science can do that though. Like, you know, like just to look at language and books and the way it's structured and how it was written and when, and then just to sort of maybe propose that there was a source material as opposed to that being the source material. That
would be so fun, based on sort of, I assume, like linguistics and stuff. It would be really linguini. We're just hungry. We need carbs. What linguini and baguettes. But it's fascinating. But at the same time, it's sort of like you could prove it not prove it, but you could have really, really good grounds for suggesting that based on those different types of information, but you will probably never actually be able to confirm it or find that text or mention of that text, right? Just because we've lost so much, like our the ways we store knowledge are so fragile.
I can just imagine God coming down on my TV show and he's acting like Donald Rumsfeld. He's like, I can neither confirm nor deny that.
I'm just imagining like a Far Side comic style, just big giant foot comes down and squishes you all. That's what I'm imagining. Just
Fuck
like
you
out
guys.
From the clouds.
I'm
like,
fucking real.
Just like a cartoon, like toga beardy God is like smush. Or like what? Okay, so here's a hypothetical. So you have this conference and you give it 6 months and you wait and you're all assembled there and I think it's struck by lightning and everyone gets killed.
Okay.
So that could totally reasonably happen.
Yes.
You know, in an atheist world, but everyone would think it was God, of course. So what would that mean?
He did it once before, he can do it bloody again.
Yeah, it would just be really, I mean, it would be tragic because I like you a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'd lose some other valuable thinkers as well.
Oh, wait a minute. Am I the guy?
Oh, yeah, you're running the show. Yeah, you're the MC.
It's going to be a shit show if I'm running it. I'll have him on the podcast. And here's your host, KP, with God. Well, Darren, you've been a very naughty boy. I've been watching you. Why is he Santa all of a sudden?
I don't know. I do have sort of like one face. To me, my vision of like Christian daddy god is just to mention Venn diagrams for the second time this episode, in the Venn diagram between Zeus and Santa Claus. Yeah. Just like kind of an angry Santa.
White.
Yeah. Beardy.
Why is he white?
Just because those are the images that were given to me as a young person.
But if you believe the out of Africa theory, not that I disbelieve it.
But crucially, I don't believe in God. That's probably the bigger pedestal.
But if he created people in his own image, that would mean that God is black.
Maybe he's been changing over the years because we don't look like we used to.
Okay, maybe. I don't get you on that one.
Maybe he's a dinosaur. I'd be up for that. Is that
why he wiped himself out? Because he was angry.
Yeah, I was like, I made you in my image, but I'm sick of the sight of me. So
tiny little arms, can't do anything.
I know, this is rubbish.
How are you going to
Why did I do this?
You're not going to make emails. How are you going to send an email with tiny arms?
He's probably really mad about those wonderful T-Rex suits that everyone has now, and that's why the world is descending into chaos. He's like, I've had enough of you people. I got rid of those things.
No, that would be funny. It's funny how he's always pictured as a white guy with a beard. It's the same with Jesus, even though Jesus didn't have a white beard, obviously, but when God's depicted, he's always this white guy with a toga.
Dirty guy. Yeah.
And he's white, you know.
Yeah. Which is, seriously, it's the same as Zeus. Like, it's the same as, I don't know if it's just straight up kind of, people just absorb that idea of a daddy god, but, yeah.
I wonder how far down the line we'll have to go before Christianity is sort of seen in the same guise as, you know, all the sort of pagan religions.
Yeah.
Because Zeus, someone really believed in that at one point.
Yeah, you know, like for sure. Yes.
People killed over that in the same way that they've done it, you know, in Christianity and all these religions as well. But to even sort of believe in that now is seen as sort of laughable, even though, what was it? Was it you that told me that there are some people that sort of believe?
I sent you that website. Okay. There's like a proper kind of neo-pagan like organization, air quotes,
that believes in Zeus
in Greece. Yeah, and they believe in the like ancient Greek pantheon of gods, and they've, you know, got a couple websites. They hang out.
Looks like it's not been updated in a while though.
It's a pretty old. It's definitely something somebody. Yeah,
it's like someone typed it up in Zeus's era.
Yeah, basically, it's definitely some like Windows 98 kind of caliber stuff. But
is there any sort of commandments that you know of, or was there something that was handed down by those gods, or was it just we have to guess if they're angry or not?
It's kind of like they're less. A lot of the stories of the gods are lesson teaching, so teaching you like not to be vain or not to do harm to your guests, like that kind of stuff. But the lesson is in the myth. They don't really have texts the same way, so it's kind of like they're showing rather than telling. And once you get into the sort of Abrahamic religions, you get into telling. Okay.
But it wasn't like most of the gods in sort of Greece really.
Well, there were tons of fun.
They were really vague.
Yeah, there were tons of. But you know, we're talking about Narcissus the other day, who was the guy who fell in love with his reflection, and then what was
his name?
Narcissus, and that's where narcissism come from, and also narcolepsy? The flower Narcissus. Not narcolepsy. That's a different root.
But narcos.
Nope, different root. Actually, same root as narcolepsy, but different root from Narcissus.
So you're good at words. I've always thought this.
Words.
So I kind of put something together because I read an article and it was basically along the lines of funny synopses of movies, and I've always enjoyed Laura's sort of short quips about movies when we're talking about them. She always has like great one-liners or a sentence about them. So I compiled a list of movies. Basically, I wish I had a little button to play just now so I could be like, Laura's synopsis. Laura's movie synopsis.
God, I'm kind of nervous now.
God, he's not listening.
Oh, well, maybe he is.
6 months.
Oh, he's out there. Boom.
That could be. Maybe we should start believing in Zeus.
Maybe, because someone's in the bins.
I'm sure it's a rat, probably.
A big rat. Believe in that God.
So, are you ready for this?
I am ready for this.
I was going to do 10 movies originally, but I kind of thought maybe you hadn't seen, because Laura's not seen a lot of movies as well. I've seen a lot of them.
I've seen some ones you would never expect, and not seen some ones that would.
Very obscure as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know how this should go, actually. Maybe I'll say the name, and you just sort of give us a little short.
Okay, I'll try.
Number 1, The Room.
Oh God. deluded human wants to watch his butt on camera for half of a film and reads cue cards for the rest of it in a tale of treachery and betrayal.
There's one of those everlasting sort of, tales where
it is.
Somebody
he
wants
just wants to see his weird square butt on camera.
It's a butt's tale. Mine's better. I'm sorry.
No, it was good. Thank you.
Okay, number 2.
All right.
Twilight.
Oh God. Abusive but curiously sexless relationship between a vampire and Kristen Stewart.
She's the kind of sexless one.
Oh, they both are.
Okay.
Which is funny because they were not in real life at that point, but it's because it was written by a Mormon, so they're not allowed to
I don't think I've ever... Really?
Yeah, that's why there's no sex at all until they're married. Yeah, and then it's horrifying, and then it's that's like really disturbing and horrifying.
That's a good lesson for kids, follow the system.
Yes, and make sure that you secure yourself a husband who is, cheers. Sparkly and abusive. But sparkly, so creepy.
That's like a sort of metaphor for someone who has lots of money.
I suppose so.
Yes, sparkling. Okay. Sorry, we're just tasting our wine.
Ooh.
Okay, that was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You like?
Yes. Number 3.
Yes.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Elijah Wood and his little friends go on an epic quest to throw jewelry into a evil volcano.
The volcano's not evil.
It's a volcano of evil. This is the art of synopsis is the sort of the truncating of concepts into its metonymy.
I like breaking them down though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you missed the line there because you could have said going on an adventure.
An adventure.
I'm going on an adventure.
I struggled with that because I actually really like Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So I could tell you the whole thing.
Doesn't have to be bad.
I know, but it was just sort of like I could just tell you the whole story.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it doesn't have to be bad. I'm just going for what first comes to mind, like word association.
And the only movie where they didn't have to change the porn name.
I'm not even really going to think about that too hard.
Fellowship of the Ring. The Two Towers. And what was the last one?
Return of the King.
Okay, that's a good one, yeah. Fucking. Return of the fucking.
I bet you that exists. I bet you anybody, but don't Google it.
At first star, fuck.
Human creativity.
It is what it is.
Oh, they were phoning it in that day.
Okay. Beep boop beep.
Beep boop.
Number 4.
Yes.
Titanic.
Oh, star-crossed lovers from the bottom of the boat and the top of the boat, and they fall in love, and the man with the thin eyebrows is very angry, and then there is a nautical disaster, which is well known in history, and one of them unnecessarily dies.
Yeah, they should have
and
all
a
died.
lot of other people.
They should have all gone. Who's the man with the small eyebrows?
What's his name?
Oh, you thinking of that Zane guy? Billy
yes,
Zane.
him. Yeah. Very.
Who went bald at a very young age as well.
And I think, could he? I don't know. I don't want to be mean, but maybe he has alopecia and he dries his eyebrows on because they're not right. They're not right.
They look sort of questioning at all times.
They do, and kind of like he's a drag queen, maybe. So I'd like to propose that in Titanic, his character actually is secretly also a drag queen, and that adds some dimension to him. That's why he's so cranky.
Yeah,
he's all repressed. Yeah.
I mean, was it 1914? He couldn't come out yet. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And he has he doesn't seem to really be into Kate Winslet. He seems to just be really angry.
Is anyone really into Kate Winslet?
I love Kate Winslet. She's charming.
Beautiful person.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually...
She's not your type.
Not my type.
No.
She's that English, even though the English rose is very attractive. She's nice.
She seems like she'd actually be fun in real life to hang out with, but I might just be thinking of all of her characters and she has me fooled.
I think I would like to go out in the piss with her.
Yes.
Get drunk.
Yeah.
Laugh. Yes.
Yeah, and more so than with Leonardo DiCaprio, because he seems like he'd be really tedious.
Yeah. End up at like a kebab shop.
Yeah, she'd probably have a kebab. She seems cool.
Sitting on the stairs, you know, and just like talking shit at random passerbys and eating her kebabs.
Yeah, she'd be one of the rare actresses you can hang out with who you could actually probably eat food with. Because it would be really a bummer if you think of like for real dating actual actresses, how they can't really eat food.
Yeah.
So.
That's true.
Yeah.
You've got like a sort of 25-year period where it's like.
You just can't eat stuff, or you have to eat stuff and then watch them watch you hungrily. That would really suck.
Okay, number 5.
Yes.
The Revenant.
Oh, speaking of Leonardo DiCaprio, gets a bear all over him really early in the film, and then has to go on a really, really long walk in beautiful scenery, occasionally encountering a mumbling, what's his name?
Wolf?
Not a mumbling wolf. There are wolves.
Yeah. Wolfuses?
Mumbles, beautiful. What's his name? Why am I?
Oh, Tom Hardy.
Yes. Her vibration the whole film.
You were merely adopted the darkness.
He's actually less easy to understand even than when he plays Bane. So that's quite fun.
Yeah. They really need to make him up as well, because he's just very mumbly.
I saw that with my parents in the cinema, and my mom was like, I can't understand him.
Which,
and I was like, they're Revenant.
The Bat-Night. Oh, Revenant.
Yeah. And it was like, it's okay. No one can understand him.
Bane, they had to make it up and you had to overdub all the parts.
I can imagine that maybe the strain on doing the weird voice would have made him have to speak more quietly, but I don't know why in The Revenant, to be honest. I really liked it, but I was very distracted by the mumbling.
I liked the movie. It was beautiful. I don't think it was sort of Oscar worthy. I don't think Leonardo DiCaprio's performance was Oscar worthy, but it's gotten to the point where he's just solidly done such good work.
Just give the kid a goddamn Oscar.
Long, just do it. You know,
exactly.
That was a strong enough movie to, you know,
it was like Oscar by attrition. It reminded me as a film. It was beautiful. I loved the cinematography, but it reminded me of, you know, when you meet somebody and they're like really quiet and you assume it's because they're thinking all the time, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if actually anybody's home in there. Like, it's kind of, people confuse things being smart with just not having words in them sometimes. Yeah. But it was really beautiful as well.
He was always a funny one to me, because I always just assumed he was older than he is, because he went from like skinny sort of maybe, you know, mentally sort of challenged to dad bod, you know. Yeah,
and he looks so different from how he used to. Like, just his face is so different. Not like he's messed with himself. He just has like a super different, he's just aged into a different looking person.
My Revenant one was barely good.
Barely good. So you have time to think about them. I'm just going, I'm trying to give an actual synopsis so you know what happens in the film.
Okay, number 6. Beauty and the Beast.
Another story of abuse turns into a relationship.
Yes.
But I'm on board for this one.
By a literal monster.
A literal monster who, I haven't seen the live action one. I'm going on the animated one here. Personally, I like him more as the Beast. Yeah. I think that's probably not uncommon, to be honest.
You like more than what?
I like him as the Beast more than as like a human. He looks like a surfer when he turns into a human, which is fine.
Don't we all?
So yeah, a nice bookish girl who I related to a lot as a kid. Dark hair, reads books.
Fussy. Not fussy about some things.
Well, not fussy about some things, yeah.
Fussy about other things.
I really like that film.
D'Artagnan, is it? No, what's his name? The big guy.
Gaston.
Gaston.
No one fights like it. That's a really good. I actually really like that, the Disney film. I really like it, like the animated one.
I love that meme where it's Gaston with the book open. He's like, it's a sandwich with words.
I also like the one about Beauty and the Beast. This would be part of my synopsis if somebody hadn't already thought of it, that Belle sings a daily mean song about the other people who live in her village, where she talks about how they're all idiots, basically.
Yeah,
like, we can hear you.
She's like some sort of pro-Russian girl that's kind of slightly good-looking, really good looking out of our village, but compared to the rest of the world, she's not that great, but she gets, you know, above her position.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Well, she's also, I think, one of the only ones who can actually read, which probably helps her feel a bit special.
Yeah.
And the thing I don't like about that film is they make wolves seem really terrible. And, you know, I like wolves.
Traditionally, they are pretty terrible in these movies.
It's true. Yes. And I'm never up for it. There's lots of,
Okay. Number 7.
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Ooh. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's affair awkwardly plays out in front of our eyes in the cinema.
Fantastic. I thought you were going to go down that road. I was hoping.
Because I was like, that was it, wasn't it? That was like, and the whole thing is just like, you know, when you say a film and the leads don't have chemistry, and that one is like too much chemistry, really distracting. Yeah, don't actually legit remember the plot just because the whole thing is just them.
It's like Brad Pitt kind of felt that his relationship with what's her name, Jennifer Aniston, was on the way out, and he was like to his agent, get me a movie with Angelina Jolie where we're married.
And it's really sexy. Yeah.
He played the long-term game.
He did. He's very smart.
That's why he's Brad Pitt.
Yep.
Okay, we're going on a slightly Scottish theme here.
Uh-oh.
Highlander.
For some reason they make the one Scottish actor in the film not Scottish.
Spanish.
Yes, he's Spanish. Christopher Lambert speaks apparently phonetic English. And people cut off each other's heads.
And
the Kurgan?
There can only be one.
Right. I always prefer Happy Halloween, sisters.
That's for the YouTube audience.
That's one of the films where you're hoping for the good guy, but the bad guy's so much more fun that you can't help but kind of hope for the bad guy.
He totally stole the show in that movie, I think, because Christopher Lambert was so wet. Like, he's a wet sock in that movie.
He's just so feckless.
I know, and you're just like, I don't care if you live or die. And then, my clothes.
Well, here's sandwiched in between these two really charismatic actors. Or I don't know if you can really call the Kurgan charismatic, but just awesome.
He is really charismatic.
And then Sean Connery, who's a mensch.
And Christopher Lambert, it's like they sort of thought, it's like Snatch with Brad Pitt. Initially, when he was in that, he auditioned for an English sort of speaking part. And because he couldn't do like a Cockney accent, they made up the part of... what's his character?
I forget what his character's name
Dags.
is, but it's wonderful. I love his character.
And I think because they just assumed that, because most people don't understand Travellers, that he could get away with just doing
just like rambling.
But he actually does a perfect accent. But in relation to Highlander, I think they just thought Scots was such an unknown at that time in sort of cinema. Yeah. They thought, well, it doesn't matter what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet.
Continuing.
Braveheart. Oh gosh. Scottish nationalism.
By a drunk
Australian
who beats up his wife.
Yeah, a terrible drunk Australian performs Scottish nationalism.
Okay.
Before anyone figured out he was terrible, though. Yeah.
And before anyone figured out Scottish people are terrible drunks.
And also kind of before people figured out Scottish nationalism, like, really super mattered as well. It was, like, funny then, and now it's, like, serious. Yeah. Well,
I think the whole reason that we had a referendum
was Braveheart.
Was because of that movie, probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we learned face paint and, like...
I think everyone just kind of, in Scotland, saw that movie and was like, shit, yeah, we did get sort of bitch slapped by the English.
Yeah, for hundreds of years. It wasn't in a oneer either. It was like a sustained bitch slapping. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Number 10, Mulan.
Oh, let's see. Wonderful Chinese Disney princess in male drag joins the army for family reasons that I forget, and gets busted, and there's snow, and it's great. I liked it, and there's a dragon.
Well, she's a cross-dresser who has a dragon in her pocket.
See, you've thought of clever things for all these things because you've had time to think about them.
I just came up with that there.
Did you?
Yes.
I don't believe you.
No, I didn't think about it.
Okay.
I did with the Revenant one.
That was good. So you're just very, very witty and spontaneous. That's a hard one because I haven't seen it since I was like 14, so I don't super remember. Yeah.
I've never seen it.
I liked it. She's like a non-wussy Disney princess, which is great. They've gotten increasingly non-wussy, but in her case, it felt like they weren't trying. It was just part of the character.
And it was the cause of some amazing McDonald's sauce.
Oh, of course.
Szechuan.
Mm-hmm.
That's why all these people went full retarded when they were...
Yes, Szechuan sauce. Thanks to Rick and Morty. Also, I think you need to see that film. One of the most wonderful sort of training montage with a twist, which is their kind of commander in the army, and it's her, unbeknownst to them, Milan is a her, and the sort of other misfits in her group, and it's the song title that this montage goes to is "I'll Make a Man Out of You," and it's all of them like having to climb stuff, and it's really 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 funny because there's the dramatic tension there of it being.
And you couldn't have that nowadays because that'd be sort of toxic masculinity.
I guess so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are in the army in medieval times, so it fits in.
11. Good Will Hunting.
I don't think I've seen Good Will Hunting. Have I?
Yes, you have.
Did we watch Good Will Hunting?
We sat in our robes.
On
our second date.
Yeah.
Okay. Where were we? Yeah.
I get that one mixed up with every film title that has 3 words in it, basically.
Yes, I think it was like our 3rd or 4th date, maybe.
Yeah, it was.
So we just went.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were staying in this hotel.
Yeah, I was on an artist residency. Yeah. So you came out to see me in the middle of bloody nowhere, which was
down
very
in Ayrshire,
nice.
Which is quite where you were quite close to Robert Burns' house.
Yes.
The great poet.
The great poet.
And yes, we sat in our robes that was provided by the hotel.
Yeah, they were comfy.
Watching Good Will Hunting.
And I didn't see the beginning, and I don't remember if I saw the end. All I can remember is it's Matt Damon being a smartass, basically.
Is that your answer for that?
Yes.
I thought you were going to go, Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. No, because he's smart in Good Will Hunting, but he's got a Boston accent.
Okay.
Matt Damon, no?
Yeah.
Something like that.
He's from the south side of Boston. He's a Southie, because that's how him and Robin Williams, they're both from the same area. That's how they connect.
I didn't even remember Robin Williams was in it, to be honest. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going with Matt Damon : Boston smartass.
And if we were really stuck for, this is number 12. If we were really stuck for sort of a premise, I'd just put any Tom Cruise movie.
His name is Jack and he wears a baseball hat. That's any Tom Cruise movie.
He's the common man.
Yeah, exactly.
This is something.
Except for the 2 films in history when he leans into being a ridiculous person, which are Tropic Thunder, where he's fat and does a dance, and
I think that's really him, like not the fat bit, but the sort of the asshole, sort of the president of this sort of big corporation.
Yeah,
and that's probably how he runs his brand. I feel,
I feel like he'd be like so worried about being nice, but he'd be like just totally shitty. It would be like he'd just be dead inside, basically. Or
really passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Like just staring at you.
And it wouldn't even, he'd like get his assistants to do all that stuff. Like you would never like meet him. No. And then the other one that he leans into that is, the name I can never remember, but the subtitle is Live, Die, Repeat. And that should have been the name of the film, as you established early on, and I totally agree.
It is in the Europe.
Yeah,
because
Europe.
It failed on its arse and
Edge of Tomorrow. That's what it's called.
It was called that in America.
Yeah.
Well, it was called it on all the posters, but because it failed so hard in America, they put the Edge of Tomorrow in really small lettering on the posters, and the main text was Live, Die, Kill, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat. I can't remember.
I think I'm sort of.
But it's you're thinking of Murder, Death, Kill.
No, I'm thinking of there's a Slipknot album. Their first EP was called Live, Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat.
Okay.
And I always get the 2 mixed up.
Understandable, as long as you don't get any of those items mixed up with each other in life. But yeah, in that one you just get to see him shot in the face a bunch of times, and it's awesome. Yeah.
It is a sort of genuinely good movie.
I really like it. I think I was very clever to lean into the fact that was Tom Cruise at like the peak of his unlikability as well, and to just be like, what movie star would America and the world be happy seeing get shot a bunch? Because the premise is basically he kind of can't, like, he's a normal dude. He's in the army, but he's sort of
he's like someone who's not meant to be in the sort of the war zone. He's
like a PR guy, basically. He's there to look shiny and be on television.
An army sort of, a bunch of aliens that are coming down and trying to take over this beach. It's kind of, I think they're trying to replicate Normandy.
Yeah, it looks like that.
And yeah, so these aliens are coming down to sort of storm the beaches, and he gets sent into sort of war. I don't know why, really.
It's some sort of weird accident. Yeah. Like he's supposed to be on TV, and then but anyway, he gets
Gleason puts him in.
Yeah, because he fucks up something, I forget, and so he gets actually sent in, and basically something happens which is complicated and has to do with aliens and time and all sorts of stuff. Where
when anything's complicated, just put it down to aliens.
Aliens and time travel. Those are the two aliens mega MacGuffins. He gets reset back to the same point in the timeline. So whenever he gets killed in combat, which I think it's really good because it sort of shows basically how desperate the kind of situation is in terms of people dying all around. And it's not like, when you get movies that are action movies with humans in them, and it's supposed to be in a realistic universe, but plus aliens or whatever, and they're all inexplicably super capable of stuff.
This is what I was going to bring up. What is the name of sort of the female version of that in action movies? Remember the
Mary Sue.
The Mary Sue is always a woman who is completely... I find it weird that it's the woman one that is more well known. Yeah, because it's always guys that are these sort of inexplicably good at everything, almost.
But it's because we judge women for writing characters like that, whereas we don't judge men for. I'm not shitting you. Like that's really what I think. It comes from fan fiction, and there were just a lot more women writing fan fiction. Okay, and it's basically because we expect men to do that, but we mock women for doing it. Okay, so the idea with the Mary Sues is one of their most kind of crucial features is they're supposed to be a stand-in kind of wish fulfillment character for the author, essentially, which I think the men equally are in action films of that type.
Daisy Ridley, the main character from the new Star Wars franchise, she was accused, her character was accused of being a Mary Sue.
And she's missing that thing, but I think the basic reason is she's not super interesting, but is inexplicably good at things, and all the other characters like her.
Well, I think maybe she was more of a Mary Sue in this latest movie because she didn't even go through half the training.
Yeah, there's no real reason. And I think all the characters really liking her for kind of no reason. Like she seems nice, but everyone's obsessed with her basically.
She's like a tier from Natalie Portman, the Keira Knightley, and then there's her at the bottom. Like there's those like three.
Yeah, and,
Keira's slightly got more of a personality than Natalie Portman, and then Daisy Ridley's just got like
she may be lovely in person, but in terms of what comes across on screen, it's sort of like I don't know.
And I think maybe in the first movie we just thought, well, they're green, they've not really acted in anything else. This is the freshness of their character,
Yeah, and she genuinely mainly runs in the first film, like mainly what she's doing is cool. Running. Yeah. She's
quite, she is fresh and sort of badass. Yeah,
and I like watching her in it. Like I'm not like but.
And, I'm not a big fan of the new ones. Where did we sort of diverge from? Yeah, so Tom Cruise in every movie is this sort of what's the male version of the Mary Sue?
There are a couple that have been proposed over the years. I'm not sure what you'd call them. Probably because again we're normalized to be okay with that in male characters in a funny way.
But you said there was a name.
Yeah, I can't think of.
Okay, I'm gonna Google it. So
okay, I've heard like Marty Stew and stuff like that.
Marty Friedman.
No, he's cool. But it's like usually what we call them is just the hero, basically. Yeah. I'm not trying to be bitter, but it's just how it's been.
That's from time immemorial. Yeah. Like the hero's story and the journey.
But a compelling hero should have sort of interesting flaws and struggles and stuff like that, whereas it's when they kind of phone it in with stuff that it becomes a Marty Stew, shall we call it? Or a Larry Stew, something like that.
Okay, so this is Wikipedia. In some contexts, the name is reserved only for women, but more often the name is used for both genders. A male can also be referred as a Marty Stew.
There we go.
Marty Sue.
A Marty Stew?
Or a Gary Stew.
A Gary Stew.
Which is really confusing.
Yeah.
I would not be able to say Mary Sue and fucking Gary
Lou Who.
Together.
I don't mind Marty Stew.
So basically, Tom Cruise in all of his movies is this sort of Marty Sue.
Because he has that lack of personality, and then the inexplicable, like everyone likes him thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because he is. Everyone that sort of talked about meeting him has said that he's very sort of. he has like an aura, you know, he's very driven, and he must be, because he is like $1 billion sort of.
I'm just thinking of that Scientology video, the one where he's like,
he has the big dinner plate on his chest, like he's
and he's just like, I crush people, and it's really weird because he reminds me of like a little dog that thinks he's bigger than he is, kind of thing. But
I wonder if he would have had the same career if it wasn't for Scientology.
That's a very good question.
Would he have sort of got the same roles, and personally would he have been as driven if he didn't have this sort of that's a good question, because I mean, probably is, I don't know how long he's been a Scientologist for. I think it was John Travolta that got him in there.
John Revolton.
John Travolta. He's someone that's declined very rapidly.
Oh gosh.
But I think he was holding out for so long, like he was just trying to take care of all his looks and his hair,
and now it's become like, call the mortician. Honestly, it's not a case for a human makeup artist anymore. Even,
you know, when you see a girl take off a corset in a movie and it's just like he did that with his whole appearance like 10 years ago,
but he's still trying to hold it together. Like, it's really weird.
I think he did that with the O.J. Simpson TV, like the special.
Yeah.
He just he was like, well, okay, I'm getting old. I can't still hold on to all this.
Yeah, but he's going like very David Geffen. It's really scary.
I do not know who that is.
I'll show you him. He was married to Liza Minnelli, I think. Eighth husband or something. I won't show you him because it's not a good podcast if I'm just showing you pictures of a strange man on the internet, but
yeah, okay, so Tom Cruise and Scientology.
It just comes up with an emoji of a frowny face.
Whoa. So there's the latest news. Sorry, it's coming up when I'm trying to check a span. So Tom Cruise reportedly set to leave Scientology for his daughter.
Really?
His daughter's name's
Suri.
Hello, Siri.
Not Siri.
Sorry, shall I leave Scientology?
Well, that would they'd come out saying that Katie Holmes had sort of split up with him because Scientology was trying to get their daughter and stuff like that. I didn't really read it. I don't really want to get into celebrity kid stuff. It's just weird.
Is it Katie Holmes or
Holmes?
Like
Holmes with a silent L, much like all of Brian Redband's L's.
Yeah, that's such a strange situation though with the Scientology. It's
because it's not. They're so they seem to be very grasping in terms of family members. Like, it really does remind you of sort of like North Korea or something like that, where it's like, not only will you can't leave, we'll mess things up for your family as well, and you can't opt out, and they kidnap their own members and sort of imprison them, and it's freaky
camps to stop them from leaving, and punish them, and it's crazy that anyone could sort of. It kind of makes you think about these places like North Korea, and you always say to yourself, why doesn't everyone just run away? Like, a country's only as strong as its people, I guess. And it's like, why doesn't anyone stand up? But there's Scientology have put like a few of its members in a camp, and those people don't run away. It just shows you that people sort of adapt to what they're put in.
It's true. And I think, let's say we look at North Korea and we ask that, and it's like, some basic tenets, like everyone is part of that, so you're saying goodbye to everyone and the other thing is God, they barely have any food. You don't exactly have a lot of energy to sit around thinking about how you're going to do that, because you can't sort of store up your reserves to do that because you don't have any. And then you look at the Scientology situation, and their version of that is, I think, kind of financial control. So it's the same thing with the community thing. Your family is either in Scientology or you're not in contact with them, basically. And then I think the church requires so much of your money and has so much control over your finances that, again, you have to leave behind everything you have and kind of start from nothing. And in our world of, social security numbers and stuff like that, it's not just that you have to start from scratch. It's you have to even figure out how to do that. Are you going to work in McDonald's? What are you going to do?
And what is crazy is Scientology came about in the last 30 years, 40 years. Now,
we know the science fiction books it came from. It's not like one of those mysteries.
Came in a time where there was media. There was history was being recorded. People still follow this.
Yeah.
And it's when you listen to it and all the theons, you know, the aliens and whatever, you know, and the the billion-year contract.
Yeah. Stupid.
But
it sounds like a little kid thing.
People still follow it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine 2,000 years ago where none of that existed, you know.
Yeah.
And Scientology is in a time where you can see everything, you know, everything's you can see who's in Scientology, you can see how much they're paying, you know, they pretty much bullied everyone to be tax exempt as well.
Yeah, which is, that's such a weird saga as well.
And then you sort of think of other religions in the past and and you question, like, if it wasn't real, then how could it come to fruition? It was like, well, we have something that's happened now. We know it's clearly not real, but people believe in it 100%. But this is something that is being replicated over and time again.
And what's more is now not only do we have all this access to information that can tell us Scientology or whatever else is bullshit, we also have all the access to information to explain the phenomena and answer the questions that we have that religion used to fulfill. Yeah. So it used to be like, oh, we need religion to explain stuff to us and tell us how to behave. But it's like, no, we can figure all that out now. Yeah. We don't need, you know, we know like why night falls and why there are eclipses and why the spring comes. We don't need religions to.
How does the tide come in and out? You can't explain that.
You can't explain that?
Nope.
Have you heard of this thing called the moon? It's really cool.
Have you not
you
seen
should
that?
Look it up on Wikipedia. What?
I think it's that Bill O'Reilly guy.
Oh no. Oh God.
He went on a massive rant saying like you can't explain the tide coming in and out. Like he was trying to, because he's religious. Yeah. I think before he got his ass sort of handed to him.
But that's like all the sort of like phenomenological sort of like, yes, arguably you can't personally explain that, but you know why it happens. Like, except maybe he doesn't. You don't even need internet for that. You just need Encyclopedia Britannica or something.
So yeah, he doesn't understand. He was on I think a TV show.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, you can't explain tide going in and tide coming out.
Shit, if I didn't know why that happened, I'd believe in something, because that would be freaky, right? Like, the ocean's gone, guys. Have you gone down today to see the water? It's gone.
And he's a prominent sort of media figure.
That's scary.
And he probably has led some people to believe in the flat earth, probably.
Is the tide going in and out because the earth's tipping over a little bit? Is that like everyone's walked to the west too much, basically, and it's tipping a bit?
Okay, I need to sort of go powder my nose.
Oh, cute.
But with time travel, I'll be back in like a split second.
It's amazing. I love it. Should I pour you some wine?
Yes.
Sweet. Actually, I might do that too while we're paused. Oh, well, we will be paused.
Swish, and I'm back. So you're going back to the motherland tomorrow.
I am.
Yes.
Yes. I'm very happy to be going home and very sad to not be bringing my favorite human with me.
Okay. Who be that? Who baby be you?
Who baby be you? It's you. It's you. Unaccountably.
And I've obviously you've been out of Canada for a long time.
Yes.
Even though you've not been there permanently in how many years now?
I left at the end of 2007. Okay. So I guess we're over into 10. Like
11
over
years.
10. Yeah, geez Louise.
And do you still sort of follow up what's going on? You know, do you watch and sort of read things that's going on to do with Canada? Or
I do a bit. The main paper that my parents get at home, the online version of it, it's like a paywall, so I don't really read it. I just see the headlines.
A paywall?
Yeah, like you have to pay to read articles. Oh. Which is pretty normal now for newspapers. It's the same with like the BBC and the Guardian don't, but like the New York Times, you can read a certain number of articles, and after
online.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, just because after like they don't have that many paper subscribers anymore, so I don't I have a lot of.
I think the BBC make you sign up with them to do it with some of their articles, which is a pain in the butt.
Oh, I've never run into one of those, but
because when I've tried to share them, it's like, to read more of this, log
in,
really? Sign up, yeah.
I've had that I haven't had that with BBC. I've had that with maybe the Telegraph or something, which is like, I don't want to read the fucking Telegraph anyway. So
it's like I would never.
Yeah.
You just want to share an article with someone, and
you're like
it's forced silly to sign up.
Nope. I still have a lot of Canadian and especially Toronto friends. Say on my. No, like in terms of on Facebook, I see a fair bit of what's going on in Toronto. Almost all of my good friends from Canada no longer live in Toronto.
Right. Okay.
It's pretty much just Ronan in Toronto, and then Lizzie's up in Sioux Falls in the middle of nowhere, which is super cool, and Katie's out east, near Halifax.
I was just asking because there seems to be like a lot going down government-wise with Canada.
Yeah.
You know, especially with your SJW president.
Yeah, Prime Minister.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We don't have a president. I genuinely tend to follow like UK and European and American politics more, just because, no offense to Canada, but they're more likely to affect world news, basically. Yeah,
because it doesn't seem to be that anything that goes down is going to have an effect. Maybe on America, I guess.
Yeah, it's, whatever problems people may have with Trudeau, and certainly there are some, he's a relatively safe pair of hands in terms of the stuff that I care about. So with the previous government, it was like, oh, look at all the arts funding and how it's gone. Whereas with him, it's like, everything's basically okay in terms of like human rights and stuff like that. So I just don't worry about it as much.
But there is a lot of tension in the world. I say the world, it's predominantly the Western world when it comes to sort of identity politics.
Yeah.
And I feel he maybe feeds the fire a little bit.
I think you're right.
Canada.
Yeah. And I don't really know if there are other world leaders who are doing that. Like, it's an interesting...
Trump, but not
that way.
Not the same way,
Yeah, Trump is a weird
one. One is a reaction to Trump.
Yeah.
And Trudeau is sort of giving the fuel, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent he is reacting to Trump as well. It's like you have to kind of balance out the North American continent a little bit. Yeah. But I think part of, not knowing that much and I've only, read a couple articles, mainly ones that you've sent me recently, but I don't necessarily know if Trudeau has confronted the fact that he can't make everyone like him.
Yeah.
And I think because he was sort of a celebrity before he was prime minister, not that Donald Trump wasn't, doesn't really, because his dad was like a super famous, like world-class kind of politician, and he did some reality TV stuff. And
did his dad not sort of reform the Canadian sort of politics?
His dad he was sort of like a Kennedy in that he was politically brilliant, but personally kind of a shitheel probably. But, he kept it together. Like, he's probably one of our most important politicians historically.
Has there been anyone that's been in office that's not had that in their personal life, but have been sort of...
Say like Obama kept it together.
I think he had to because of the situation he was in with his sort of being the first black president.
Yeah,
I think
you don't want to be the first black president, and
well, he had to set a precedent.
He had to set a precedent.
The president had to set a precedent.
Yeah,
and he had to not have a scandal of some sort.
But theoretically, all of them have to not have a scandal, and they just can't keep it together for some reason.
Well, do they though? Because they're human. You know, there's no way around it.
We but like
put so many people on a pedestal. You know.
But it's not that much of a pedestal. Just ask people to not cheat on their wives. Like
true.
It's not. We should have some expectations. I think.
True.
You know.
But there is this sort of falseness. I think with America, like there's a level of falseness.
Yeah.
I think there's like a paradigm, but it's not the true America. But it's one that it projects in sort of maybe Fox News and all these sort of weird sort of TV shows where it's this sort of really sort of fundamentalist moral culture. Yeah. But it's not really what America's like.
I don't have a problem with the moral implications of it as much as I have a problem with the fact that like you know everyone's watching you and you know you shouldn't do that.
Of course.
But you don't have the self-restraint to not do that. Like it's not the thing, it's the fact that they cave into doing the thing that bothers me.
I just mean America generally is like this and then
it's weird.
They elect someone to be the head guy, you know, which is a stupid idea in the first place.
And then the whole thing is a stupid concept.
They
like that
expect
sort of
them to be sort of godlike in a sense, but it's not going to happen, you know.
No, and I wouldn't say I expect people to be godlike, but I just expect people to not do all the stuff they've said they're not going to do.
But you're not American.
No, I'm not. It's true. But I just mean in terms of basic, like, if you want, like, but I mean, maybe it's a stupid, like, if you want to hook up with different people, don't get married. Like, that's just don't do that. And then maybe someone would say, well, no unmarried, you know, president is ever going to be elected. And it's like, well, then that's an entirely stupid system.
No, it's bullshit. It's the same with even the royals. Like, is it the Canadian woman that's marrying Prince Harry?
I think she's American. I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah, she's American. Okay. But they shoot suits in Toronto.
What's her name?
Meghan Markle.
Yes, that's it. And she said she had to delete all her social media this year. Yeah. And it's like, it's such a silly idea.
It is.
That you have to do this for someone because you're marrying someone who is no different from anyone else. Yeah. Only from being named something.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just boring.
Or being slightly more inbred than the rest of the country. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
It's very weird.
I hate it's just these systems and these traditions, and it's bullshit. That's how we get so we get so stuck in these little warps. You know, and people in England, there's a lot of people that are obsessed with the royals, you know.
Which I find so... I mean, we've talked about this a fair bit before, but it's such a weird... Because the justification is always, they bring in tourism money. And it's like... No, like, nobody's coming to meet the Queen. And, like, Buckingham Palace would still be there if there weren't these... Like, I don't know...
And you know, to a certain... compared to what they spend as well, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it is an insane thing. And especially when we have, like, you know, twice as many homeless people as we did a decade ago. And it's just not a good allocation of resources, basically, on a practical level. And when people have sort of learned these responses, like, it's the tourism. And it's like, no, you haven't. There's no real proof of that. Like, there's no.
And tourists are going to come regardless of the Queen.
Yeah, like exactly.
No, I've probably said this before, but no one's hoping to get a selfie with the Queen.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Yeah.
And there's whole dorms that are sort of segregated for themselves, which are not open to the public.
So they'd probably make more money if they actually
opened it all up.
Yeah. And they could make some space that way. And when we've talked, like, I think there are a few good models for royal families, and say, again, it's like Scandinavia is heaven, but their royal families seem to be mainly it's philanthropy, and they live in, like, flats in the town. And
is a Spanish one as well? They're still going, I think, are they?
Yeah, there are a fair few still going. It was kind of basically the ones that aren't going because they got banished by fascists at some point. So that's kind of equally bad in some ways, but it's weird.
Bloody fascists.
But, like, literal fascists. I mean, like, actual, like, Italian. The Italian royal family got, like, I can't totally remember this. I'm not sure. I'm Mussolini? Talking out of my
No.
I'm talking out of a hole in my head here. I don't really remember, but they weren't even allowed to go within a certain distance of places. It was like really harsh. Or like the Russians, that went really well.
Yeah. Good old Stalin.
Yeah, well, good old Anastasia and
Anastasia.
Yeah.
I always find that funny because obviously it's a stupid American singer.
Oh. Is it?
Yeah. I think so.
I don't know. I haven't heard of any of the very deceased Russian crown princess.
You know the one that sounded like a man when she sang?
Oh, yeah. Is
I
she
wonder
American?
if you...
I thought she was like European because she sounded like... Really?
She was American. Well, she could have been.
I thought it was too bad to be American even.
I wonder if you know how it really feels.
And she wore like... For some reason that was... So I've only seen music videos like in 2 periods of my life, which was traveling in Europe with my parents as a kid because we'd get like MTV, whatever. Weird. I always thought she was like a weird Euro one just because of the sunglasses,
have
basically.
You seen the spelling of her name, though?
Oh, with a C. That's another reason I thought it was a Euro thing. I thought she was like Eastern European or something.
Yeah, she permanently looked like a soccer mom, you know.
Yeah, but like one who like just got divorced and had a few too many like 2-liter glasses of Pinot Grigio and was out on the town, like hitting on the, car valet guy.
Oh, she's kind of starting to look a bit old now.
She was starting to look a bit old in about 2005.
Yeah. Well, I almost kind of had her in the same sort of the way I looked at Fergie from Black Eyed Peas. They both look similar, and they kind of were hot in 2000.
I find them both very manly and slightly creepy.
What are you trying to say?
They just have intimidating chins.
So do I.
Yeah, but you are a dude, so
I identify as a table. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Can I put stuff on you? They can have whatever chins they want, but I just didn't find them attractive.
Yeah.
And it's confusing. I don't know. It's funny because you'd think as like somebody who's, I'd say, predominantly attracted to men, that maybe then the girls I would find attractive would be manly girls, but no, it's confusing.
Do you think there's a sort of slight racism when it comes to sort of genocides? And how we...
Yes, I do think there's an overwhelming text, not a subtext of racism that comes to genocide.
But in terms of how we sort of remember them?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like, I think people relatively don't give too much of a fuck about, like, genocide in the Congo compared to, like, in, Bosnia and Herzegovina.
But the number one genocide that we know of was in China when it was Mao. Mm-hmm. And
I'd say the number one is probably that. Oh, this is going to be depressing, but the Holocaust is probably the most obvious.
The numbers are completely different.
Oh, I thought you meant like what people know of, like what people are most likely to think of first on the list.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, most people sort of forget. Well, Stalin was more than.
Yeah, I think people. Stalin, I'm not sure because people seem to undervalue the Russians as well, but it's also because Russia's really big.
I think it went the Holocaust third. I think Stalin comes in second in terms of the numbers, and then it's Mao. Yeah, he was the big one, but that's one that no one ever talks about.
I think there's a practical reason for this, which is a lot of Holocaust survivors are resettled in North America, and that's
the West. Yeah, where media sort of
and it's
takes
like
place. I
guess.
I
know plenty of people whose ancestors are Holocaust survivors. Like you'd have a hard time finding someone in North America who didn't. Whereas I wouldn't think the same thing happens.
And both of those places became sort of communist. Mm-hmm. So Russia and China are a place that don't really, are sort of not allowed to talk about things like that. Yeah,
they do not communicate in that way with the outside world. That's also true.
You're not allowed to Google Tiananmen Square when you're in China.
Well, you're not allowed to do all sorts of stuff on the internet when you're in China.
Not Google it because they don't have.
Yeah, because you also can't like go on Facebook and stuff like that. Yeah. So. Yeah, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
They have like beta versions of it though.
Yeah, well they have like, I forget. But the funny thing is like, if you're going by numbers, I'm sure that they're hugely popular social networks because China has a lot of people and they have to use them. So.
But we just sort of disregard those numbers because they're Asian and China.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Because they usually, most technologies made in China. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them sort of copy. Like a lot of Google stuff and the iPhone stuff has been copied and made in China because obviously their factories are there, so they can replicate it. Yeah. But yeah, to get back onto the genocide, it's one that I wasn't even taught about in high school or any part of school was the Stalin, what he did. And
yeah. I learned about it because I did like a specific module in like
you
Western
went
Europe.
fancy pants school, yeah.
Well, we had like AP courses, so we got
fancy
to do
pants school.
I went to fancy pants school, and I did a module.
Did you wear fancy pants?
No, we weren't allowed to wear pants. Well, we weren't allowed to wear trousers.
I'm so confused as a British person right now. It's like
we were allowed to wear British pants. In fact, we were encouraged.
You're incorrigible.
But yeah, I had a really good and by good I mean completely weird and very much not committed to the curriculum, but in a really good way, history teacher for this Western European history module that I did, which was kind of a funny story because in spite of going to fancy school, it was a small fancy school, and so we were doing these
was it the fanciest?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. Which is part of why I wanted to go there, because
that's why you're not good at math.
Yeah, they couldn't make me. Nobody could make me, though.
If you went to the fanciest one, you'd be Asian and really good at math.
They can't change my race. That's too much.
Well, maybe.
If I went to the fanciest one, I just have fancy watches. That'd be my thing.
We'll just use ones and zeros to recompute you into an Asian.
Oh, okay, cool. Sweet. Well, if they can make me good at math, as long as I don't have to lose anything, totally up for it.
You might gain boobs.
With math?
Yes.
Are they about math? That seems counterproductive.
I'm the computer master.
Oh.
The games master.
Oh.
It's a reference to a 90s TV show.
What TV show?
Games Master.
I have not seen nor heard of until now, but I'm glad it does what it says on the tin.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so we had a good history. And when the sort of the backstory is that the module that was offered was Western European history from, I forget what century, but like, let's say the 19th century onwards. But the AP, which is the like American College Board kind of first year credit, I guess, exam. So some schools do IB, International Baccalaureate, and some do AP.
Okay.
We did AP. You don't write an exam in that course. Like that course is then most closely related to whatever exam they think you should write. So they're like standardized tests. Okay. And the standardized test that matched that course was just all of history. So it was like, okay, so I've learned like a tiny bit of history and now I'm going to write this whole big exam and hope that I happen to know most of the rest of this history. And as we've talked about before on this podcast, I'm good at tests. Yeah. And I do, did it's already know.
Like people who are good at IQ tests, it literally can be just boiled down to you being good at...
you're good at this specific kind of test. And I happen to be good at that specific kind of test. And I happen to have a fair bit of general knowledge. And so it was totally fine. But I was like, this is really weird.
One of Mao's lesser known generals.
General knowledge? But better than general nuisance or general waste. But yeah, we covered some of that stuff, but we didn't like... It was all very white still. Right. We didn't really get into Asia at all. Yeah. But we did a bit in Russia.
Really?
Yeah. But
still white.
Yeah, still white, exactly. Whitish. But I think it's that we've talked before in terms of sort of impact of tragedies. The first port of call, weirdly and sadly, is do these people look like me? Like, can I relate to this? Yeah. And it's silly that that's the way that we first relate to people because we're all people and we know what it feels like to be a person. But I think things are still more immediate to people if you can say, look at images of them and be like, oh, I can imagine, being there. I can imagine that that's me or my friend or my family or something. Yeah. And then we do, we just don't value certain populations as much.
It's sad that we don't really talk about it in schools as much, but the fact that's even sadder is that China is not allowed to sort of really talk about it either.
Yeah, that's very strange. And that, like, compared to Germany after the Second World War, their strategy in terms of sort of rejoining the rest of the world has been to kind of really unpack everything and actually talk about stuff. And it's amazing. They could have been so kind of damaged.
I think they could have went down the route of, I think if it hadn't been split into two, they could have genuinely went down the route of Russia or China, like this sort of communist, Germany. And I think they were saved with the Iron Curtain, I guess. And not that democracy in the Western world is the savior of any country, but But you know what I'm saying? Like, they were brought sort of forward with half being, you know, behind the Iron Curtain and half being in part of the West.
I wonder if that allowed them to sort of like, as much as it would have been horrible being divided in that way, if it allowed them to kind of, I'm sure there are people who have written like theses on this and stuff. It'll allow them to kind of come up to cabin pressure in a way. Like it was totally, like a staggered thing. Yeah.
But they could have totally just went down that route and been a different type of Germany at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, entirely. And what they've come out as is probably one of the best places to live, really, which is very amazing. Interesting. Yeah. And it was not that long ago. And like, I have a lot of German friends just like by chance when I moved to Edinburgh. The first friends I made were all German girls. And yeah, it's like they're totally comfortable like making jokes about stuff. And I don't know if that like equates to being totally recovered, but
I think they feel like a sort of an old... They feel like a new country built on old knowledge, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because they're sort of fresher and newer, but they have the sort of experience of like their whole country up until that point. It's the same with sort of maybe America. Like America grew so rapidly, even though it was a new country, because they had this thousands of years of sort of English and sort of tradition and, you know, knowledge up until that point, and other countries that eventually came there, you know.
Yeah, it was like they inherited so much stuff. Yeah. And it kept coming in waves as well. Like it was sort of like in America, like every time maybe they were running out of inspiration from like the, you know, Norwegians or something, then you had a wave of Italians and you got all sorts of cool new stuff.
You mean one of those non-shithole countries?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Although at the time, Italy was certainly regarded as a shithole country. Yeah. They weren't even really regarded as white. Not that that should matter, but that was the gradient at the time.
So racist.
But it was sort of like...
Glad you're going home tomorrow.
Oh, cheers. Thank you. I'll go right now. It was weird. Like, it's weird, the shortness of memory. It's like, oh, you've been in the country for one generation, so you're fine now. But you new guys. You guys are weird. And it was the same with the Irish and with the Italians and...
It's the sort of hypocrisy of these places, you know, especially America. That is always the one that's in our lens, because that sort of is always in media when it comes to these issues. I guess they're at the front of the sort of not the war, but the resolution of sort of societal issues. And so we're always looking at them to see what they're experiencing. It's always weird. It doesn't feel like Great Britain's sort of, I say great, I mean the UK is sort of going through those issues on the same scale.
There's just a really different history in the UK. I think there's a funny thing in America, and again, this is I'm not American. I haven't lived in America, but to generalize,
you're not American?
I'm not American. I'm Canadian. There's I don't know if this is this kind of the American dream thing versus, for some reason, America's evolved in this parallel universe wherein like people don't have the right to not die in hospitals and stuff like that. But the gulf between the expectation of how good your life could be and how bad you'll accept your life being is so big compared to, I'd say it's a lot narrower in the UK. Like your life could be pretty shit, but it's not gonna be that shit. Yeah. On the whole, like unless you've totally dropped outside of society, and you're not necessarily going to expect it to get that much better, but you don't have this sort of this feeling of falling so short of how good your life could be. And like, let's say in Scandinavia as well, shit's really expensive. Everybody lives in flats. You know, you have a shitty car, but you can basically do the stuff you want, and you basically know you and your kids are going to be looked after. So everything's pretty happy.
Their wage is more according to what they're paying in tax. They get paid more, you know.
They're who?
In Norway.
Yeah, like but they also know what
they're paid more in accordance with the tax that they get, you know?
And their taxes guarantee, like, they don't really have to worry about how many kids they're going to have. Yeah. Like, booze is really expensive. That sucks. And yeah, maybe you're not going to have a really big, mansion or...
Only if you drink in a pub, but if you get, like, a carry out from a convenience store, it's still the same price for booze.
Is it?
Yeah.
That was... not my experience.
When I was in Sweden, that was the same.
Oh, okay. It might be because it's different from country to country as well. They're all different countries.
when you go into a pub, it's like £10 for a pint.
Yeah, it was really, really expensive. And the general cost of like food was really expensive as well. Of course, it was, but you aren't worried that if you have too many kids that you're not going to be able to feed them all. Because the government's going to look after their education and that kind of thing.
You also get the same sort of paternity leave. if you're a male.
Yeah.
Towards the men as well, which is quite good as well.
Which I think is something like we've talked a lot between ourselves and as a world and stuff about the pay gap between men and women, and one of the sort of hidden things that goes into meaning there is a pay gap, even though women aren't necessarily paid less on the dollar for doing the same stuff, is that it's women who take time out if they want to have kids.
It's funny when we always picture this sort of idea of, I hate to use the word utopian sort of society. I think the movie Her is probably one of the closest examples. The way it feels is it feels like a sort of Scandinavian society. Yeah. And it's funny how that is what we want to sort of inspire.
I think the thing that we're missing from her world is like, I gotta go like skydiving or something, because it would be like too safe. Yeah. It would be kind of boring. The colors are so soft.
I don't know. If you can have like phone sex with your operating system, I would never go skydiving.
I'm sure you can try and convince Siri to. Yeah, because that would be terrifying.
Scarlett Johansson was in my ear.
Oh, okay. Definitely going back to Canada.
But that's the one that we sort of like to be the sort of that's the closest thing to sort of Eden as we have, I guess, in society.
Yeah, and of course,
obviously that's why Donald Trump used it as an example. Like all these other shithole countries.
It just means white people. It's just because they're really white.
Well, why didn't he say British people?
Because we're not white enough. Like everybody knows it's really white. Not really, but
the epitome of sort of a great modern society is a Scandinavian country.
I don't think it's that well thought out. I think he's just going for, like, he has a Norwegian ancestor, I think.
But they have more sort of close ties. Like America has more close ties with the UK than it does Norway. I'm surprised he even knows where.
Donald Trump knows where Norway is?
Exactly.
Like, seriously.
But why did he use that?
Well, he has a grandfather who's Norwegian, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Or it was something else. It was like he was German, but he said he was Norwegian. It was something. Anyway, he's heard of Norway in the family.
I think he was German.
Yeah, but he said he was Norwegian because he didn't want to be. I don't know if that's like an internet myth though, so I don't want to perpetuate that if it's not true.
Terrible.
But I think he was just going for like people who are probably definitely white, which isn't even super accurate because there is a fair bit of immigration. But
well, during the Viking times, there was also. I hate to tie this into. Obviously, there was Muslims in the Viking world, so obviously I assume that there was people of color, amongst that, you know, those villagers and whatnot.
Yeah, probably. I'm Turkish bias, went to Iceland. Like it's like the world was a lot more complicated a lot earlier on than we think.
It's probably where Turkish delight came from.
Oh yeah, I think it probably came from Turkey. Spoiler alert. Probably not even. It's probably one of those weird things.
It's a cold dessert.
Oh yeah.
And it's Turkish.
Oh, good winking. Yes. Yeah. For all our podcast listeners out there, our host does an impeccable wink. Yeah.
Well, there's a YouTube fellowship as well.
Yeah.
Fellowship.
They're not getting that side though. They're getting the normal side.
I can just like look at you from this side.
You could be doing whatever on that side of your face.
I've done this a few times where I pretend to fall asleep on the side of the car, like when I'm driving.
What?
When I'm in the driver's seat. So I'll have my hands on the steering wheel and I'll put my head against the sort of framework and I'll close my one eye.
God.
And then I'll leave my other eye open just so I can see where I'm going, and then I'll just like try and wake someone up in the car.
I'm super excited for you to get arrested.
For what?
For sleeping in the goddamn car.
No.
I mean, I know that's not like a specific crime, but I feel like it would get you pulled over at least. Probably. I was just winking for a really long time.
It's a jumper, it's not a pullover. You should arrest me for these jokes.
Someone please come take him away. But yeah, just back to sort of what I was saying. I think it's that maybe in, say, the Scandinavian countries, and even to an extent in Canada, you pay higher taxes, but you know what you're getting in return. For America, it's too late. Like that's not the model that they've come up with. And so that gulf between sort of what they've been promised and what they can realistically expect is so unfair compared to somewhere like a Scandinavian country where there's nothing wild happening. You're not, again, going to save up and buy a mansion with an outdoor pool and stuff, but you know things are going to be pretty much okay. And I think that would just be kind of soothing.
They seem to have the best aspects of sort of socialism mixed with sort of a capitalist society.
Yeah, it's weird because they're not abstaining from capitalism. Like there's a lot of like small business and creativity and stuff. I mean, peculiarly, as far as I know, this is still the case. Statistically, they seem to have really high rates of treatment for depression.
Really?
Yeah.
But does that mean they're just recognizing it and treating it more?
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it is medication based. This is like from about 5 years ago, so I don't know if it's still true. This is like a conversation I had with my dad a few times because we were talking about like, is statistics about treating depression the same as statistics about having depression, basically?
No.
So that's an interesting little thing to throw in there. But I think it is entirely possible that it's just, for instance, just comparing it to America, which is, you know, bad stats, but just for sake of argument, people can't afford treatment for depression in America, whereas they can in Scandinavia.
And statistics aren't universal. Like how they're taken from place to place and how they're sort of formulated is completely different from place to place.
Genuinely, for a math idiot, the first thing I would do in terms of like combating fake news and stuff is teach a course in interpreting statistics, because people just seem to see anything with a percentage in it and they're like, well, this is true, like this is proof of this thing, and there's so rarely any information about whether or not it's a good study in terms of like the sample size and stuff like that. It makes such a huge difference. And it would be really, really, I think, helpful for people to understand that they are allowed to be critical of statistics and to kind of inquire where they come from and whether or not they're good.
If you go on the internet and you have an argument, you can find any statistics to back up any from any point of view, whether you're a right winger, you're a Christian, you're sort of a Muslim, or you're whatever. Yeah. There's always going to be statistics to back up what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And you could even take the same set of statistics and interpret it in two opposing ways. So let's say, off the top of my head, totally making up this number, 46% of women in the workplace experience sexual harassment. So you could take that statistics and you could say 46% of women in the workplace experience this. This is terrible. That's such a large number of women. Or you could say fewer than half of women experience this. It's not that big of a problem.
No, true. It's like the glass half full or half empty.
Yeah, and people just
don't mean like with sexual harassment.
No, I know. But it is just the way that
harassment?
You position. Always.
Imagine that was a poster that the government releases in terms of.
I'm gonna put one up in the bar. Yeah.
Are you half full or half empty?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's pretty funny, actually. But yeah, you could say the same basic thing, and because people aren't gonna think critically necessarily about the number.
Cheers. Chin chin.
Chin chin. Then whatever you've just sort of. You've added some level of truth to whatever you say that follows, but it's still whatever your opinion is. And it's not even necessarily people who know what they're doing who are interpreting statistics. They're just finding these things and being like, well, this means that.
When people sort of mention statistics now in a sort of public format or in media somehow, usually I just sort of blanket now because it's kind of pointless, because anyone can find any statistic anywhere. Yeah.
Whereas I almost I lick my chops and I'm like, let's figure out who's lying about this. Yeah. I just like knowing what's going on.
Who's going through a divorce?
Yeah, exactly. I did listen to your last podcast and I heard that you brought up my my alimony reflex in terms of figuring out why famous people do stupid stuff in terms of projects they take on.
It's one I've taken on board.
I like knowing what's up, but I thought it was an interesting point that you guys brought up about sometimes it's to raise funds for another project. So that's more optimistic than just child support. But when you're like, oh, he has 8 ex-wives, like maybe that's why he's making Troll 5.
So I don't think anyone's making Troll 5.
Find the guy with 8 ex-wives and we'll get there.
So just to sort of bring this round, someone that I've been kind of sort of following recently.
Creep.
Okay, I've been following you everywhere. Oh. I know what you do at night.
Cool, I hang out with you.
And I've kind of avoided sort of delving too deeply into his lectures and his thought processes.
Prostheses?
I've listened to a few podcasts where he's been on it, and I know he's embroiled in a lot of controversy just now. And it's the Canadian Jordan Peterson. Yes, Jordan Peterson. Peter Jordanson.
Peter Jordanson. Yeah, that's his evil twin.
Peter Johnson.
I I actually have an uncle named Peter Johnson.
Really?
Yes, I do.
That's like...
Careful now.
It's like penis McPenis.
He's an uncle by marriage.
By penis.
I know. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. So like I didn't sort of understand how sort of well thought out, and even though I'd heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast the first time, and this was sort of when it all sort of kicked off for him. And just sort of preface it for people that haven't heard of him.
Yeah.
If you've been living on Mars with the Tesla buddy car, he's this. I think he's the head of psychology at the University of Toronto.
I'm not sure. Let me just look it up.
And
I don't think that's quite
he's a professor, and basically, obviously, with Canada being down like the coal mine, Canada's the canary when it comes to social justice warriors as a country.
We're a small population in a big space, so we're good for experiments.
And there was legislation coming in to say that he would have to sort of legally call people by like their sort of pronouns, like they, them, ze, blah 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 blah. And he protested against that, not because he didn't want to call them that, but it was because he felt that it should be up to the individual whether they do it, not because they're being, whatever phobic. And so
that's Bill C-16.
Yes.
So that's So he's he's a full professor, but he's not a
full professor.
So he's not like an adjunct.
He's
professor.
A fool of a
He's
took.
a full professor. And he is a clinical psychologist, cultural critic, and professor of psychology at U of T, so the University of Toronto.
So I was saying that right.
Yeah.
What's a clinical psychologist?
Basically that you're not an armchair psychologist. You actually diagnose people.
So in a medical setting.
I'm going to look that up actually, because that's what I've assumed, but I'm not sure. Oh, never mind. Some focus solely on research into the assessment, treatment, or cause of mental illness and related conditions. Some teach, whether in medical school or hospital setting or in academics. The majority of clinical psychologists engage in some form of clinical practice, so professional services including psychological assessment, provision of psychotherapy, development and administration of clinical practices, and sometimes forensic psychology, which is like my next door neighbor is a forensic psychologist in Toronto, but it's usually like for legal reasons, basically. Yeah. That's like, cool. Why did you do that? Yeah. And
so like I've started to get into him, like I'm starting to understand his sort of following, and I think he's starting to garner a female base as well, but predominantly his following is male, and especially sort of young males in the sort of university age, that sort of young.
Yeah.
You don't know where you really are with your personality, because as a young guy, you're just you're an idiot,
Or as a young girl, I promise I was an idiot and may still be one, but
I mean, we all are. Like, even though you can be book smart, you can be all forms of smart, but you're just a raging hormone bag, and you're just all over the place.
It'd be a textbook case of like super smart, but a complete moron for like a decade. It was amazing.
A proto-human.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, when puppies have like, they're a puppy, and then the next day they have like long legs and big paws and big ears, and like, you're like, oh my God, I hope you grow into that, you freak.
Wait a minute, you're talking about Pokemon.
Puppies.
He's going into his final form.
Yeah, well, kind of. But it's like, it doesn't happen in usually 3 neat stages like with Pokemon. It's like, hey, I knew that. It's like you grow 1 foot really big, and then you're like, oh shit, I hope that one catches up, because I'm going to be falling over for a while. It's like, and you do that psychologically as well. Like, you just get, you develop enough to get into really bad trouble without being able to actually cope with it, basically.
And if you've not really heard of him, if you've been living on, again, Mars, I suggest that everyone go and listen to any of his lectures, but mostly the 2 episodes on the Joe Rogan podcast.
It's his first podcast on Joe Rogan, especially. Well, logically as well, to start off with.
Chronologically.
Chronologically. And he gives a fair bit of the background to his sort of recent sudden exposure in that one.
He's been linked to sort of being right wing. Even The Guardian the other day posted something saying, is Peter Jordan dangerous?
Jordan
Peter Johnson. Is he dangerous?
Is my uncle dangerous?
Is Laura's uncle dangerous? Why is he?
We all are.
Is he? Not is he? It was something to do with naming him as a right winger.
Yeah. Which I don't
crazy.
Like agree or disagree with his opinions. No. I have some I agree with and some I disagree with.
Like
he's not right wing. Like I don't know where that. Yeah, exactly. And it's this lumping and splitting of people into right wing and left wing at this point. And as you were pointing out the other day, and I didn't totally get what you meant at the time, but it sort of pushed the center. It keeps pushing the center of right wing and left wing in really weird directions, and it's very hard to kind of orient yourself.
And there's probably people that thought themselves on the left maybe even 10 years ago, and now by whatever, you know, they are now in the middle or the right, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's just we should you use enough energy trying to orient yourself at those horizons, and it is a waste of energy, to be honest. It's much more important to actually just, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's, you know, being exposed to longer format podcasts has sort of helped me be able to pick and choose a bit with what people are saying, because you actually get to hear a good chunk of what they're saying, as opposed to like I generally my first experience of that was when I was doing my philosophy module when I did my master's, and it was to do with Zizek, who we've talked about before. And never have I been so
cokehead philosopher.
I've never been so polarly divided by one person from like one sentence to the next. We'd say something and be like, yes, this is he's solving every problem in the world. And the next sentence would be like, no, like that's so unethical. Like, how can you dare even say that?
His philosophical comments is as erratic as the cokehead that you would think he is. That you would think he
was, and I still am amazed he's not. But it's just like a roller coaster. But it was actually a good exercise in kind of mental aerobics in terms of like having to parse it. Like, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. Maybe that's another good thing that people should do, is just actually listen to what people are saying, even people that you assume you won't agree with. This whole no platforming thing, it's not what a safe and healthy society does. But and I guess you could argue we're not safe, but
his lectures,
which I just don't understand, because if I like, and I do this with films as well, the films I will see either are films I think are going to be good or films I think I'm going to hate, because I want to find out about them. So I would always go to a lecture of somebody I think is going to be abominable, because I want to know what they're going to say.
I think because he's coming from a place of sort of objectional truth, maybe not with his ideas, but the actual science and the psychology around a lot of things is sort of sound. You know, he's done his research.
Yeah. I think some of it gets a bit weird.
Yeah.
In terms of his sort of Bible interpretation stuff, which is funny because is he a Christian? I don't think
I think if you go and listen to the first episode with him and Joe, he sort of explains himself when it comes to, I think he sees the Bible stories as the great parables as they are. Yeah. He doesn't see them as literal things.
Yeah, because that was my one kind of like he seems to have gotten on. He
takes it as literature. Yeah. Like these are sort of things to sort of take lessons from, as opposed to actually.
And I think maybe that's why people have been interpreting him as being right wing, because it's like, oh, it's a guy with this belief politically. Oh, and he does Bible study stuff. And like, you can study something without believing in it, obviously. But I think that's part of the thing. It's like the two, you know, whatever hits you get about him are like the pronoun thing and then Christianity.
But there's
that's I think what suggests that.
There's a whole thing in the middle that he's a brilliant mind. And like you say, his mind's so well organized as well, and
that's the thing that impressed me most about him initially.
He speaks so well. I think
he does.
There's only two people that I've heard speak that barely say an and and a but and a like, and it's the guy who made the Zeitgeist movies,
which I still need to.
He was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
What's his name?
I can't remember it. And
Mr. Zeitgeist.
I should
Geist.
But he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and the Zeitgeist movies is the trilogy of movies that are sort of talking about the paradigm and how it's a thin veil and it's not something that's going to be here or is or has been here forever. Yeah. You know, we always just assume that the way things are is going to be like that forever.
And that's the nature of a Zeitgeist as well. That's
and
does what it says on the tin.
When you hear him speak on this podcast, he never pauses and he never says or oh and he's like a robot. but not like in the sense where it's monotone. Like he's very sort of expressive, but he never.
That's interesting, because that could be a number of different things.
It's disconcerting.
Because that's almost like somebody who's never learned that they have to. Peter Joseph. Okay.
Peter Johnson's cousin.
Peter. Oh my God. That could be someone who's never learned that he has to do that to make other people comfortable. Yeah, and maybe his brain was too full of being brilliant. So or that's maybe totally he's autistic
and he doesn't understand how things make.
Well, that's kind of the same thing. As he either has not or cannot learn that, or he just doesn't need to do that. Maybe he processes that quickly. Like I certainly need my verbal tics. But such as that. But. It could also be somebody, for instance, in like a total manic freak out. Like it's hard to.
But Peter Joseph and Peter Jordanson both speak sort of well.
Jordan Peterson.
And this was, you might have heard some sort of talk about Peter.
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
You're like me with films with 3 words in the title. I can't,
Johnson, Peters.
Morgan.
He was on Channel 4, which is a British television network, and I assume that most of you know. And there was a woman who, I think she was seen as the sort of the progressive feminist amongst the sort of journalists.
Which is too bad, because there were brilliant ones of those, but I don't think she was one of them.
Well, she was seen as the cream of the crop, and that's why she was.
But by who? Like,
I think just the British.
I think Channel 4
journalism group, and she.
No, they can do better than that.
She was put forward to sort of question him on his supposed right-wing ideas, but he's nothing of the sort. He's someone who has ideas, but they're not based in left or right wing. They're just based on what he assumes is facts.
And he's sort of politically autistic. Like, I think part of why he's so baffled by people's reception of him is that he's never sort of oriented himself based on those 2 poles, which I think is exactly what we should all be not doing. Is paying attention to those 2 things as sort of structural inevitabilities when we're organizing our thoughts. But I think because of that, he's just like baffled is the best word I can think of in terms of people's reception of him. And I think he, maybe even just by coincidence, has come upon such an interesting and difficult linchpin in terms of something that's kind of some sort of crucible for all of the things that are being worked through in our kind of identity politics and politics at large now. And
I think he was someone that doesn't regard himself as left or right, but he was someone in the middle that just took a stance against an ever sort of furthering of a pendulum that's the left, the pendulum swing. And before it goes too far left, he just said, when it comes to sort of legislation and law, I'm going to take a stand against
and
this.
I think people have taken the headline as I refuse to call people these pronouns. And I don't think that's a headline at all, but it's something he's had to stick by for the sake of his arguments. And this is part of him. It's sort of a good news, bad news deal for him, because it's part of why he comes across as such a well-organized mind, but it's also something that's doing him no favors. Because he can't
humanize him.
He can't destabilize his argument by saying, like, yes, you personally, I will call you whatever you want me to call you because I'm not a dick. Because that doesn't work in his argument. But I think that's probably the story. It's just that he doesn't want the government to tell him that he has to call people whatever. Which I think is perfectly logical.
Of course.
But then the crucial issue there is then when someone confronts him and says, I want you to call me so-and-so, will you call me so-and-so? What does he say? Like, he has to choose between.
But I think I don't think when it came to sort of a body saying you have to call them this, that, and the next thing, and when the government says you have to call them this, that, and the next thing, if that didn't exist and someone had said, look, can you call me this? I think he would have just done it.
It wouldn't be an issue. I totally agree. But the thing is that now he can't compromise on that on a personal level.
Well, he has to go out on a shield with that thought. That's his thing. That's that's his Thermopylae. That's what he has to do.
It is, and it's awkward because that's not the linchpin. The linchpin is the fact that it's the government making you do it. And that's a huge slippery slope in terms of the government making you do anything. And that's the long form of his argument, but nobody gives him a chance to do the long form of his argument. And so of course he sounds like an asshole, because who wouldn't do that?
Do you know what would be a good sort of a conversation if Trudeau and Peterson,
that would be interesting, because I do together. For his flaws, I think Trudeau is actually really smart. And I think they would be both willing to meet each other halfway as well.
No, of course. I think not that Jordan Peterson doesn't have humanity. I think Trudeau's more so, you know.
Oh yeah, for like, and the thing is, like, it also helps to just understand academics and that
Imagine
sphere
if they both
and what they're like.
Were running, you know, they both got to run the government. You know,
that would be brilliant. They're like a two-person person. It would be great. It's like the old, I love this joke, but Simon Amstell talking about how he had this huge crush on this sort of brilliant, sort of tragic and dramatic actor, and Simon Amstell's a comedian, and he's like, we could be a two-man Robin Williams.
It would literally take two men to sort of create the energy that Robin Williams did.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. We only have time now for two-man Robin Williamses.
Okay, so yeah, what were we going to say? Sorry.
Just that part of the problem as well is that nobody who's had a debate with Peterson thus far has been not a knob. Like, it's all been unproductive. And if you, I don't know who, maybe Trudeau, maybe that's a good idea. Yeah. If you actually got somebody who is willing to have a long form, non-clickbaity, insane, aggressive, cornering conversation with him, maybe that'd be great.
Maybe Joe Rogan's podcast is maybe the platform for that, for someone to come in and actually
I think so, because I think I've loved his conversations with Joe, but I think Joe, not wrongly, is quite intimidated by him and lets him kind of rip.
I think it showed maybe in this latest podcast that he needs someone to sort of come in and question him, that knows how to question him.
Yeah, because the most recent podcast, I'm not as impressed by it, because it's basically Jordan Peterson saying things, and that's cool, but it's not to me as much of a conversation. I don't, to me, and I mean, the first one, it really is majority Peterson talking as well, but it's because he's giving kind of the backstory, whereas the new one, it's not. I listened to it again, but it's not, it doesn't have the flow. And I don't think Joe is necessarily presenting other sides to the argument that much, just because, not that he's failing to do so, just based on what Peterson is talking about, there isn't really a place to do that. And there are a few things that Peterson's saying that I totally agree with in that one, like he's talking about sort of responsibility is something that you embrace. I think that's hugely important. I think that's a really good message, and I hate to think of people missing out on that message because they've decided he's right wing or something.
No, of course, and that's something that's kind of terrible, that people are going to miss out on a really important message that he does have, because they just assume that he's a right wing person.
And you're allowed to agree with some things someone says and disagree with other things. We all do that in our personal relationships, so I don't see why we can't do that with public figures. It's quite weird. Or it's like they always say, good parenting, you don't tell your kid they're bad, you say they did a bad thing, you know. And so it's like, it's not the story of their personality, it's just a thing they've done. And I don't see why now we can't look at people with that kind of compassion.
I think we jump too quick to just say people are bad as opposed to them doing bad things.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are some horrendous people out there right now as well. And a lot of them have been given a lot of platform by certain political figures.
Jordan Peterson would say that there are terrible people
for sure. Yeah. And there are some, and there are terrible idiots, but we have to, listen to them and double check they're terrible idiots before we write them off. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so we're pretty much drawn to a close.
All right.
I'm going to try and end this on a slightly different note.
Okay.
Favorite recent movie that you've seen?
Oh my God. The new Blade Runner. Okay. But if we're going more recent than that, I really like The Hunt for the Wilder People.
Brilliant.
That was really, really good. Me and this fat kid. That was great. Yeah.
And our book or favorite book you're reading?
Well, right now I'm reading the wonderful wine book that you got me for Christmas, which is Reading Between the... I can never remember if it's vines or wines. Reading Between the Vines.
Reading Between the Wines.
Yes, it's my Count Dracula accent. I get the V's and the W's mixed up.
Would you recommend it to what sort of level of people that are that are interested in wine? Is that a book that you would sort of?
I would say you don't have to necessarily know that much about wine, but you have to want to know about wine, because that's what it deals with. I think it is helpful for people who work in wine on whatever level, because a lot of it is to do with how you communicate kind of with wines, but then how you communicate with people you're speaking to about wines as well. I'm really enjoying it. It's great, but it's like, cause I get into this thing where whenever, cause I really want to know everything, and this isn't necessary to reading this book, but it's like whenever he mentions like a grape variety that I'm like, I can't remember where that one's from. And then I have to look it up, and it gets into little Wikipedia rampages.
And last of all, one of your favorite quotes from anything.
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh my God. One that always comes to mind for me is a quotation it's actually from a Chuck Palahniuk novel.
I love how you say that.
Chuck
you sound very Canadian.
Chuck.
No, the Palahniuk.
I can't actually remember what piece it's from, and I can only paraphrase the quotation, but it's basically to deal with the fact that basically most people can't bear to see themselves as they are, and that's why vampires live so long, is they can't see their own reflections.
That is brilliant, actually.
I think it's really good. I'll find the exact quote for you. It's like in my laptop in my home screen. So,
okay. So what's your social media for people to find you, or your website?
If you're into art or wine, I do both. Instagram, Laura_Z_Hope, all spelled the usual ways. I'm on Facebook as well as Laura Hope, but mainly Instagram, and I do have a website, laurahopeartist.com.
Fantastic. Anyway, you woke fucks, that is us for this week, and I'll be back with another guest next week.
Which has gotten rid of me.
Ciao.
Arrivederci.